temperatures have continued to increase. And when temperatures increase, what does it mean? Even when we're having the rainy season like this, and it rains, evaporation is always enhanced.
But every time you fell a single tree, you have ended its lifespan of sinking these emissions.
They vented, they flared. We are not going to flare our gas. We are going to harvest that gas because we need LPG.
So the discussion opened my eyes to the reality of what is happening in the world today, and that is that a country like mine, one of the most vulnerable countries of climate change, and yet the least country to deal with the effects of climate change, is suffering firsthand but is not aware of what climate change is.
How many countries that have succeeded in the Paris Declaration? You have New York Declaration, where Uganda committed itself to plant about, I think, 11 million trees. That was in 2015. Have they planted them? How are we progressing with that? What is our common future?
Yes, welcome to Smart 24 TV. I'm Ivan Tibenkana, and this is the Green Frontier, the program that basically looks into matters regarding climate change. We are living in a moment where globally we are facing problems regarding problems in terms of climate change. However, with such an impact, there are efforts to look into mitigation and then the adaptation. Industrialization has grown over time. And right now, we are talking about the fourth industrial revolution. However, countries such as Uganda, we could talk about the Horn of Africa, Eritrea, Djibouti, Ethiopia, among others. Talk about Mozambique in Southern Africa. We could talk about the Sahel region. They are all suffering from impacts of climate change. Desertification as a result of changes in land use. However, we have so many challenges. The awareness is equally a problem. How many people understand this topic? That's one of the biggest questions. So in Uganda, I will talk about the previous flood issues in Mbale. And then this very month, Kasese has been a victim. Now, these are two of the most ravaged regions in Uganda when it comes to flooding, mudslides, and the collateral that comes with it is quite detrimental. Talk about death, destruction of the natural reserve. We talk about the forests, the plantations, the vegetation. We could talk about the food crops. And what comes off this is the famine, the death. And that's a setback to the economy. You could take a look at this and then understand. Just a moment. Sand and the construction industry are complementary, as the former serves as a raw material for construction work. Sand mining in Uganda is jointly regulated by the National Environment Management Authority and the Directorate of Geological Survey and Mines that issues licenses. But this doesn't necessarily mean that all mining activities are regulated countrywide. The activity, for economic and social considerations, crucially avails revenue of the sale or export and use domestically for construction. However, with a growing demand, well-known areas such as Ruera, Katavi have posed an immediate concern for environmental protection as pits, cultivation and recreation land is compromised. We are yet to see how the recently passed Mining and Minerals Bill 2021 that categorized sand as a mineral plays out to aid protection of wetlands and the ecosystem in general. Demand for quality timber has exponentially grown. This, coupled with the need for wood fuel and charcoal, has pushed the country's forest lands to the edge. 200,000 acres of forest land lost every year through deforestation and illegal logging, smuggling to East African neighboring countries such as Kenya and Rwanda. The National Forestry Authority, through the 2001 Forestry Policy and the National Forestry and Tree Planting Act 2003, is mandated to set up and implement management plans. Still, over 2 million metric tons of charcoal are produced every year. The trend is bound to grow as urbanization takes stronger strides across the country. And the impact has long-term, far-reaching consequences such as these. As industrialization and investment grow, so does the need to critically preserve sensitive areas of our ecosystem.
This is what we are promoting, eco-industrialization. We want to be planting trees and all that. But I know the question that you're asking is about the wetlands. I need to give you an answer about the wetlands. Yes, we have a clear directive from our president not to license new factories in the wetlands. And I will tell you right from the time you received this directive, last year, we have not licensed any new factory in the wetland. We work very, very closely with NEMA in our biggest industrial park, which sits at 2,200 acres of land, Namambe. We have preserved the green belts, we have preserved the wetlands, and therefore we are coexisting. Where our factories are largely on the dry lands, and therefore we're not licensing, and we stop backfilling in the areas where there is wetland, clear visible wetland. We have mapped them out to preserve them. But we have been under directive to get more land, dry land.
Between Chiroro and Karasa was the river crossing where our machine gunner, Mondo to Highway, used to do a lot of damage to the UNLA. There was not a single encroacher at that time. It is now invaded, and so is Mayanja, Wenkanwe, Wabukokoma, etc. When I go to those areas, I really want to get out of the car and start fighting. These are areas I know very well. They must get out. Those swamps had nobody who was in those swamps. When I flew to Kiwoko recently, I saw the swamps that feed into Mayanja, Machebebe, Chizikibi, etc. being encroached on. This is my last warning to the local authority all over Uganda. Damage to our local water bodies affects 40% of our rainfall. How can we tolerate that? This is a danger to our very own existence.
Yes, hopefully the visuals that you've just taken a look at give you a perfect picture of what exactly climate change really looks like. We're looking at the impacts of the flooding in Uganda, particularly the mountainous regions. You could talk about Karamoja, which is basically a semi-arid area. The droughts that come with it are quite detrimental. But how about the adaptation? That's an issue. So as we continue with this program, let's take a look at activism, because basically in this program, for this episode, we shall be looking into the activism and then how we've leveraged the policies, environmental policies, to be specific, to come up with the drive, a perfect drive towards creating a green economy. And obviously, the green economy should come with collective responsibility. The policies have to work out. The mitigation plans have to be there. How about the adaptation? Key issues. So when it comes to activism in Uganda, it's been one of the measures to understand and then tackle climate change issues. Carbon emissions, we could talk about industrialization in Uganda taking a stronger perspective. Namamve sits on 2,209 acres, and it's a wetland, perfectly filled with industries. Do we particularly understand our carbon footprint? So about the activism, it's surprising. It's been taken on by the other gender. It's a female-led drive. So let's take a look at one of those vocal individuals. Hilda Flavia Nakawe is one of those names when it comes to activism. But how did she get into this? It's quite interesting. Let's take a look at what it means to be a female activist agitating for climate protection, rather environmental protection. You have a number of policies regarding the environment. You could talk about the National Environment Management Policies that came back in 1995 with the establishment of NEMA. We could talk about the Wetland Management Policies, the National Forestry and Tree Planting Act of 2013, among others. So with the activism, it comes off a setback. If things take a certain trajectory, a certain trend that is opposite to what's believed in, then issues arise. Let's take a look at what it means for an individual, a female to be specific, to get into activism, and where exactly are the challenges? The awareness, is it there or not? And how about the people that are responsible to protect these issues, from the youth to the elites? Let's take a look at this.
If people get to be climate aware and get the right information, they'll stand up for what they believe, so we will have more female activists on board. And activism is, climate activism is a cause that is, that everyone should embark on, because it's about us, it's about our now, it's about our future and the lives we are living on. So this should be a fight for each and everyone who wants to stay alive, and I believe everyone wants that. And that's why we have education, that's why we have good health. So there are some things that cannot stand alone. For example, society. We can't have established societies, we can't have established economies with falling apart climate. So basically, we have to be in good relations with our environment for us to strive, for us to survive. So that is why we need one-on-one.
So let's talk about Fridays for Future. Does it come after the activism in you? 2019?
Yeah, well, I started my activism in 2017, and by then I was volunteering for a local non-government organization called Green Climate Campaign Africa, and it led a discussion at my university by then, and the discussion was about climate change, something I had never given thought before, but something I had suffered growing up as a young girl in a small village. We faced the effects of climate change, and to me it was more or less the things we face on a daily. I didn't know it was climate change until this discussion. So the discussion opened my eyes to the reality of what is happening in the world today, and that is that a country like mine, one of the most vulnerable countries of climate change, and yet the least country to deal with the effects of climate change, is suffering firsthand but is not aware of what climate change is. So I took it as a responsibility upon myself to create awareness about the climate crisis with other people that I'm staying with, the people around me, and Uganda entirely.
So General Fridays for Future is all about environmental activism.
Yes.
And then there's something interesting about all this. Looking at the names behind these activism activities and then the coalition campaigns, I find most dominant names being female-led. Talk about Juanita Wabiri, talk about Vanessa Nakati, among others. Why is it so that it's you people at the forefront, the gender, the female gender? Why do you find it so interesting?
Well, I think there has been for long a fight for gender equality, and now climate change being one of the most challenging, one of the most challenges we are dealing with. And it comes at a time when there is a fight for gender equality, a fight for climate change, and these fights are intersectional. So we can't have one without the other. And being that climate change affects women most, at least according to a report by UN, 80% of people affected by climate change are women. That puts us at a more risk end, you get? So we bear the responsibility of fighting against climate change. So that is why you're seeing many women in the climate change circles, because it's about us, it's about our lives. We face the effects of this more often than men do, and that means we are able to offer solutions from our experiences to combat this crisis.
Let's talk about, let's switch the topic a little bit, or the area of coverage. COP is coming up.
Yeah.
Sharm el Sheikh, Egypt. It's not so far from now. One of the most, okay, let's put it this way. Regarding this convention, they are banking on the successes of the previous conventions to address mitigation matters. Do you find Uganda having succeeded at some point?
By success, I wouldn't say we have, because right now we are looking at a just transition. The world is looking at a just transition, and Uganda is nowhere close to that. Yes, we are an agricultural economy, we are agriculturalists, but still we are not there at the bar that is needed, for example. Yes, we have less emissions compared to other European countries like Germany or France, but still we aren't at the level of just transition, because we are still relying on charcoal. We are still relying on firewood. We still cut down trees to provide this energy. Our electricity production is way down, and you find that some places in Uganda don't even have electricity up to now. So if we are looking at a just transition, it involves first stepping away from fossil fuels to renewable energy. Uganda is still at this fossil fuel era, I should say, yes. And we are still using firewood, we are still using charcoal, and now the exploration of oil. So we are not yet at that level. So I would say it's a success. Yeah.
Because I think it's one of the biggest problems Africa was and continental. Look at South Africa, the reliance on coal, and then other means of energy. So I think it's a general problem. However, away from that, we are looking at, there's an upcoming event when you look at the activists, the End Pollution movement. Perhaps you know something about that. So they are looking at addressing, holding corporate bodies to talk about the manufacturing industry accountable for their carbon footprint. But basically we are looking at plastic and plastic pollution. How hard is it to hold such movements in Uganda?
Well, you find that some of the restrictions are not friendly. For example, when you look at some of the activities we do, like creating awareness, it will need you to have a placard or a message board, stand, for example, on the street or a place that is has a lot of people to create awareness. And with this, because of some of the laws in Uganda that are not favorable for such kinds of actions, you find that most of the activities we do are limited. You won't hold up time to stand on the street, because police will come and ask you, what are you doing? You're creating chaos, or do you want to withdraw the government, or something like that. And yet it's a different case in countries, for example, like France or in the Europe. You can hold a protest, you can hold such actions, demand for climate, for example, justice from leaders, from corporate organizations, anyhow.
So ideally, the Public Order Management Act of 2013 is a big problem.
Yes, it is, because it doesn't allow for us to do such activities which will, in other words, create awareness and improve people's understanding of what climate change really is.
I read something about your activities, and there is one special drive that's against the East African Oil Pipeline. It's quite interesting. When you look at the current economic crisis, you're addressing matters regarding supply bottlenecks and then the inflation. And the EACOP is part of a project that many Ugandans out there believe will be so vital, especially when you look at the current spillover effects of the Russian-Ukraine crisis. Oil supply. When you talk about the oil producing Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries. They determine the supply and then they determine the price. This would have been one of the biggest projects as far as utilities are concerned, oil in particular. You don't believe in it. Why is it so?
Well, this project is not economically viable, like they said, or financially viable, because some Ugandans have hope that it will increase their incomes. Uganda is going to earn from it, but that we are not. That is not the truth. The truth is we are not going to earn from it as Ugandans. For example, Total Energies, which is leading on the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, is a company, it's a French company.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they are coming in as investors. But they are given a tax holiday in regards to the ECOP project of 10 years. That means they are not going to pay taxes for all this long.
But then most companies in Uganda, investment companies, have that tax holiday exemption.
Yeah, exactly. But how sure are you that the oil will be in production for over 10 years? And we've seen that this project poses environmental challenges. For example, Uganda as a country is an agricultural country. We depend on agriculture for survival. Most of the exports are agricultural products. So if we are then bringing in another project, for example, oil producing, we are affecting the economy. Sorry, we are affecting the ecosystem. We are affecting the environment, which we survive on. So because of this project, for example, the emissions from the East African Crude Oil Pipeline cause a significant challenge for our health, for the environment around us, and also for agriculture. In case of an oil spill, during the production, during the transportation of this oil, yes, it is going to affect our waters. For example, a third of the pipeline is going to be constructed on Lake Victoria Basin. And you find that this is the biggest freshwater body in Africa. It's not only in Uganda, it's also shared in other African countries. And over 50 million people's lives depend on this lake for survival. So in case of an oil spill, people will be affected, their sources of incomes will be affected, aquatic life, fisheries will be affected. And yet this Lake Victoria is the second source of fisheries in Uganda. The first one is Lake Albert. But you find that this project is starting from Hoima, where this lake is situated. So we are posing a very grave risk to agriculture, to tourism, to fisheries, which are one of the biggest contributors to Uganda's economy.
But then there is the environmental impact assessment and all the collateral procedures that come by that NEMA undertook. Is it still insufficient?
You cannot say for sure because, yes, the environmental social impact assessment was made, but this is always made for different projects, but we still have these challenges. Take a case of Nigeria. Don't you think these assessments were made?
Absolutely.
But with all the oil, with all the spills, the oil spills, with all the environmental challenges they are facing, it comes with such incompetency. And this is always seen in projects in Uganda. A lot of swamps have been reclaimed, have been encroached, but don't you think the environmental social impact assessment reports that were made for these projects?
They were?
Yeah, they are. But we still have these challenges. So how sure are we that this report will prevent us from having all these challenges that we are trying to put out?
In your opinion, the project is already running. What could be the best approach?
The project is at the exploration part.
Development phase.
Yes, and they haven't yet started constructing the pipeline. So it would be best if these resources, if these finances are invested in green energy, in renewable energy. For example, there is solar energy that can really be a very big investment because Uganda receives a lot of sunlight throughout the year. and Africa at large. So if this is used well, if these resources are used well and to the best of our ability, we can even provide electricity for the neighboring countries, and that is a very good source of energy.
All right, local activism is at a shortfall. You could talk about the Public Order Management Act that came through some time back, and it basically addresses issues regarding activism. You could talk about demonstrations, you could talk about strikes, and all that. So movements such as these require a lot of collective responsibility. And obviously, you have to go toe to toe with the people that observe security in this country. Talk about the Uganda Police Force. So with such setbacks, what does it really mean? It's a setback. However, first, we shall be heading into the break. When we get back from the break, we shall look into what it means to leverage the current policies in this country, environmental policies, obviously. Environmental management is quite key. We're talking about the biodiversity, an ecosystem whose sustainability depends on how we interrelate with it. What are the damages to it? You need to settle for that. But how do you do that? It's quite key. So in the next bit of this conversation, we shall be talking to one of the researchers, and is an expert in wildlife ecology, an expert in environment, and then vulnerability issues. So first, the break, then we come back, it will be more of that.